Guys, and please confirm to me. All of you get my voice on screen. Those are attending in online. Guys, please confirm to me. All of you get my voice on screen. Those are attending in online. Guys, please confirm to me. All of you get my voice on screen. Right. Right, sir. So, don't worry. This I'm coming to the classes a bit delay. So when I go outside, might be some meetings are going on anyway. So max, then within few days onwards, within few days, I'll start our class as this time. Don't worry for it. Why? Because I'm having some back-to-back classes there. Then maybe within few days, then before the batch is going to be started a bit earlier mode. At least 5 to 10 minutes gap is going on for me. Then from that point onwards, I'll start classes immediately. All right, sir. Next one. What we completed there in the last class, try to understand this. Yeah. Then if we observe this content here, IOC containers we completed, I think so, right? Acha, next topic. Oh, it started beans in Spring Framework, right? Good, nice. Now, what is the topic here? What is the bean here? We given definition. What is this bean here actually? Bean is a reusable software component. It's a normal Java class, contains properties and the respective setter methods and getter methods. Setters and getters. Okay, fine. We will use bean components in almost all the advanced technologies and frameworks. Advanced technologies and frameworks. What are these? No, Enterprise Java Beans CJBs, active forms, action forms in Struts framework, backing beans, JSF, POSOs in Spring framework, NDD beans in EJBs and Hibernate, and DTOs in MVC based applications. Okay. I started these rules and regulations also, right? Rules and regulations to use beans in Spring framework. Nearly 6 or 7 number of rules here we need to have. What are the 6 or 7 number of rules here? In Spring applications, every bean must be a POSO class. What's the meaning of this POSO class? No, plain world Java object. It does not extend or implement any predefined library except java.io.serializable. Except that it shouldn't extend or implement any predefined library. Okay. Some people might be asked, what is POJ? POJ, plain world Java interface. All Java bean classes in Spring applications must be declared as public and non-abstract and non-final. Public, non-abstract and non-final. What is the requirement of this public? No, to provide scope of the bean class to the container in order to create object. Then what is the purpose of non-abstract here? To allow to create object for the respective bean component. What is the purpose of non-final here? To allow to extend one bean to another bean. But it is rare case. Extending from one bean to another bean is a rare case, not a frequently used concept. Next one after that, in Java bean, in bean classes, we have to declare all properties as private, and in bean classes, we have to declare all methods as public. Why private and public concepts we require there? Why private methods? Why private variables and public methods here? We need to provide. No, answer is very clear. The main answer for this content is what there? To improve encapsulation. To improve what? Encapsulation. So this is the best example to describe encapsulation in Java. Java beans. If we declare variables as private, no, we cannot access that variables in outside of the respective class for accessing the data, for getting the data. And by declaring setters and getters public, we are giving a path to the users. If you want to set data, then we have to access set methods. If you want to get data, we have to access get method. That means our data must be flow. Our data must be flow through the methods only. Whenever our data is flowing through the methods now, where data and coding part both are binded, as per this, we are able to conclude encapsulation is achieved. Right, sir. An example also we are given there for that. That's okay, nice. Then after that, after completion of this, what next one here? Constructors inside the Java bean classes. If you want to provide constructors inside the Java bean classes, wachara, wait just sir, 5 minutes. I have to go there. Just 5 minutes. I'll come back. Guys, those are available online. Just wait 5 minutes. I'll come back now. Within 5 minutes, I'll come back. Guys, please confirm to me. All of you are getting my voice on the screen. Yeah, guys, I've taken just 5 minutes break. All of you are getting my voice on the screen. Please confirm to me. Guys, please confirm to me. Guys, please confirm to me. All of you are getting my voice on the screen. Please, everybody. All right, sir. That's okay, fine. All right, sir. So then Java Beans topic we are understanding there. Then rules and regulations to provide the Java Beans. Next one is if you want to provide any constructor in a Java Bean component, you have to provide that. Then that constructor should be public and zero argument in general. But zero argument constructor parameters constructor depending on the context we can provide. But it should be public. That is confirmed. Next one is after that while creating bean objects by the container will search and execute public and zero argument constructor, but depends. This zero argument constructor is a depends. Observe carefully. Next one is in Java Bean components, if you want to generate hash code values as per our own implementations, if you want to generate our own hash code values as per our own implementations, not to follow Java provided default algorithm, then we have to override object class provided hash code method in Java Bean class. In general, hash code methods are able to return hash code values, no? So we have to use that internally. We have to override that if any case, if anything is existed like this. In Java Beans now, if you want to perform, if you compare two bean object components by using object class equals method, then we are able to get references comparison, not a content comparison. But if you want to customize this, if you want to compare two bean objects on the base of the contents, not on the base of the references, no, there we have to override equals method in our Java Bean class now. So these are the various rules and regulations here we have to follow to use this content. Okay, I think we give in some configuration details also there. All right, sir. Yeah, exactly. Then every, see, it's a minimum. Then every class in Java must be provided in packages. See, for testing point of view, we may not use packages in core Java or maybe in other classes, no. But if you want to design any application, that every class, not even Java Bean class, every class must be provided under packages only. That is clear-cut modularization we are able to get, and a clear-cut like what I'm telling there, readability we are able to get if we provide like this. Definitely, it's mandated to specify every class under some packages. Even we have seen some examples. In that examples also totally packages we have taken. Everywhere we have taken packages. Without packages, we are unable to prepare the applications. That's okay, fine. Next one is what is the benefit of implementing serializable interface now? Guys, already given information for that. What's the benefit of implementing serializable interface? No, the point is what? By default, bean objects are not transferable in the network. But if you want to give eligibility for the bean object to transfer in the network, there we have to implement serializable. In general, in any distributed applications or in any web applications or in any applications, if you want to transfer something, there we have to, if you want to transfer something in the network, no, that thing would be Java Beans only. Java Beans only we are going to transfer from one application to another application over the network. It's required. So because of that reason, we have to implement the serializable interface. That's okay, fine. Next, one more point I've given there clearly. Understand this. In Spring applications, after defining bean classes, we have to configure bean classes in a Spring configuration file. We have to configure bean classes in Spring configuration file in order to supply bean class name to the IOC container in order to create bean objects. So actually, who is going to create bean objects? No, IOC container will create bean object, maybe bean factor or application context, whatever it may be. So if they want to create bean objects, they need your bean class name or not. They need to know your bean class name. On the base of that name only, they will search for the respective dot class file and they will create object for the respective dot class file. So they must know the name and location of the respective bean class. Right. How containers will get name and location of the bean classes? No. To get name and location of the bean classes, container will go to the Spring configuration file. Whatever the configuration file here we prepared, no, and a container will go to the Spring configuration file where it will check for all the bean configurations, and there it will identify the required bean class names. As per that, it will search for bean dot class file. If it is identified, immediately that bean class will be taken. Then for that bean class, the respective object will be created. So because of that reason, if you want to use any bean component in our Spring applications, we need to create object for that bean component by the container. So to provide details about our bean components to the containers, we have to prepare Spring configuration file. Inside the Spring configuration file, we have to provide all the bean components clearly. Right. Okay, fine. Now let us understand this point here. How we are able to provide configuration in bean configuration? Then what exactly the elements here we have to use? First, we have to use bean stack. Bean stack is representing what there? It is representing root tag. Inside the bean stack, what we have taken there? Bean tag we have taken. That single bean tag is representing single Java bean component. Single bean tag is representing single Java bean component. Observe carefully. Okay. Then inside these bean components, some attributes are existed. What are the various attributes are available, guys? Now tell me. ID attribute, name attribute, and a class attribute. Then what next one can know? Scope attribute. Now tell me. You only tell me where what class attribute is able to do. Now tell me what class attribute is able to take. Where class attribute will provide the fully qualified name of the respective bean class. Their class attribute will provide the fully qualified name of the respective bean class. Observe carefully. Class attribute will provide the fully qualified name of the respective bean class. Okay. Next one is class attribute is okay. Then we have to go for like what? Scope attribute. Then we have to go for like what? No, ID and name attribute. Okay. Right, sir. Now let us understand. First, we have to understand ID and name attribute. After that, I will go for scopes. The scopes are having some story. I will discuss about it. But first of all, let us see ID attribute and name attribute. What is the purpose of ID attribute? What is the purpose of name attribute? Now here we have one important interview question also. We have an important interview question also. What is my question here? What is the difference between ID attribute and name attribute in bean configuration? This is the question here we have to understand. Maybe even if you are from experience, then you may get this type of question. What is the difference between ID attribute and name attribute? Right, sir. Observe carefully. What this ID attribute is able to do? ID attribute is able to provide single identity for the bean component. For bean component in the sense bean object. Single identity for bean object. Okay. Then here, what is this name attribute actually? Name attribute is able to provide multiple identities for the bean component, multiple attributes for the bean component. Not like a single identity, it will provide multiple identities for single bean component. Okay. Where I'm giving clarity, where multiple identities are separated with either with space. Multiple identities are available, that all multiple identities are separated either with space or with comma or with semicolon. We are going to provide multiple identities along with name attributes, where these multiple identities will be separated either with spaces or with a comma or with what there semicolon. Okay. First of all, let us see these points now. After that, I will go for more and more number of content. Let's see up to this part here. I think already we prepared one example, right, in the previous class, where I prepared this example there. Observe carefully. IntelliJ idea, I want to open it. One application we prepared there in the last class. Right. Now here, I want to open Spring config.xml. Your customer bean is existed. Am I right or not? Your what bean is existed here? No, customer bean is existed. Inside this customer bean ID here we have taken. Okay, customer bean like this here we provide everything. That's okay, fine, nice. I don't want to give any information here. Just I want to go for like what there. C1 is an identity here we want to provide. ID attribute value is what there. C1 I provided. Let me save this. Then after that I'll go for tester.java. If you want to get that bean now let me remove all these things. Cessna.println not required. Right, sir. I don't require all these things. And the next one is like what there. This information also I want to delete. Right, sir. This is the total information. But here in a get bean method, what I have to use there? C1 we have to use. Then we are able to get output. If we run this example, here we are able to get some output. Let me execute this. There we are able to get the some output. Directly we are able to get output. As it is the C1, we define as ID value inside the bin. That output here we are able to get. So here what we are getting there, customer bin loading. Customer.java might be here we provided these statements, not required. I want to delete it. I don't want to use that. Now here also I want to delete this. Okay. All right. Now let me execute this tester.java again. Now we are able to get some output. Still we are able to get loading and initialization, but finally here we are getting some output. Observe carefully. All right, sir. Now, first of all, I want to try this example with ID attribute. C1 is available. Let me provide multiple IDs. C1, C2, C3. Have I provided any space? Have I provided any comma? And have I provided any semicolon? No. So because of that reason, this total name is treated as a single identity. C1, C2, C3 is what now? A single identity. Now, okay, if it is a single identity, is it possible to get that on the base of C1 that I am trying to check? Where definitely we are able to get some exception. What is that exception here? Being not defined or being not definition. No such being definition exception here we are getting. No such being definition exception here we are getting. Okay. So in this scenario, it is not worked out. For example, if I provide C2, C3, now this total is acting as a single identity or not? C1, C2, C3 acting as a single identity. Now let me check this here. If we execute this, now we are getting output. Customer details here we are getting there. As is output here we are getting no exception. Okay. Now I want to check that real identities. No. C1 space C2 space C3. C1 space C2 space C3. Now three identities I provided along with what their ID attribute. Now in my test.java, with C1 I want to get customer 1. Observe carefully, I don't want to display any data here. Now here, what I'm trying to say there, as out, I want to say directly customer 1. Next one is customer 2 is equal to, now context dot get a bean of, here we have to provide like what there, es2 semicolon. Now here what we have to provide there, cast operator here we have to provide. There I want to display like what there, value we have to display. Now it would be like what there, customer 2. Okay, similarly C2, not S2, C2. Now here what I'm trying to say now, customer 3 I want to take, here C3. Now here customer 3, object reference values I want to display, I don't display any other one. All right, sir. Now this is overall 3 in a Spring configuration file along with ID attribute. No, 3 identities I provided by providing space separator. On the base of that each and every identity, I'm trying to get the bean objects. Whether I'm able to get all 3 bean objects or not. If this program is executed without having any exceptions, no, then it will be great. Now let us see this one. If you are getting an exception, our concept is wrong. That means we can understand with ID attribute we cannot provide multiple identities. If you are getting any exception, we can get the conclusion with ID attribute we cannot get multiple identities. Now let me execute this. Here we are getting an exception or not? No such bean definition exception. No bean named C1 available. So here we are getting some exception. So it's not possible. Okay. Maybe spices may be the problem. Comma. Comma. Now I thought of it, C1, C2, C3 are what there? Identities for the bean. Multiple identities, no? But if it is multiple identities on the base of C1, C2, C3, on the base of C1 separately bean object I want to get, on the base of C2 bean object I want to get, on the base of C3 I want to get that separately bean object. Let me execute this. When we execute this, again we are getting the same exception. What is that exception here we are getting there? No, observe carefully, that exception would be no bean named C1 available, no such bean definition exception, no bean named C1 available. So there also be bean is not existed here in all the cases now. Okay, maybe the problem with the comma. Now this time I want to try with what there, semicolon. Semicolon C3. Okay, semicolon I provided, C1 semicolon, C2 semicolon, C3. Now get. Now let me provide the same thing. I thought of it, 3 identities are provided. On the base of the same 3 identities, I'm trying to get bean objects. Now okay, let me execute this. Possible or not possible? Again, we are getting the same exception. What is that exception here? No bean named C1 available. Similarly, no bean named C2. Similarly, no bean named C3. That all the things here we are getting. Okay, fine. Right, sir. So it is very clear that along with the ID attribute, we are able to provide only one identity. We are unable to provide multiple identities. Okay. But if I use a name, in place of ID attribute, if I use name, now C1, C2, C3 are 3 identities or not? Along with the name attribute, we have to provide like what there, C1, C2, C3. All the things are like what now? Multiple identities. All the things are like what now? Multiple identities. Now let me check it. Let me execute it. Please check it. Are you able to get any exception or not? No exception. But we are trying to display customer object reference values or not? Of course, same value or different value, that doesn't matter. Finally, we are getting that customer object reference values or not. I'm trying to display the customer reference value there clearly. Okay. Fine. Now, along with name attribute, if you provide C1 semicolon, C2 semicolon, C3, then internally Spring Framework is taking all the three things are like what there? Three separate identities or not? Okay, fine. For example, in place of this, I want to put comma C1 comma C2 comma C3. Possible or not possible? I want to check it. Now here, let me execute this. Again, we are getting bean object references or not? That's okay. Now here, I want to provide here spaces I want to provide. Spaces I want to provide. Then where we want to execute this. Again, we are getting three references or not? So finally, what we understood the point here now, ID attribute is able to take a single identity, but name attribute is able to provide three different identities. Three identities it able to take. So, but all the multiple identities will be separated with either with the spaces or with the comma or with what there semicolon. They are the points here we understood. So here the cases are like what there. So name attribute will take like this. Then one more point here, one more theoretical point. For example, for the name attribute, we provided three identities. Am I right or not? Only the first one is acting as an identity. Second, C2, C3 are acting as alias names. Are you getting my point or not? Only first name is acting as an identity, but second and third one are acting as like what their alias names. Sir, all of you get my point or not? Alias names. So that point here we have to understand. In the name attribute, we may provide multiple identities. Wherein multiple identities, first value is the actual identity and the remaining values are alias names. And the remaining values are like what no? Alias name. Just observe carefully. Bean name is equal to bean1 comma bean2 comma bean3, and some other tags are existed. Like this we provided bean tag. Example. Here what is actual identity? Where B1 is the actual identity and actual identity, then where B2 comma B3 are the alias names to B1. That's it. In that way here we are able to understand these points clearly. Okay, fine. Alias names we have taken. What is the meaning of alias names? No, duplicate name. Alias name is like what there? Duplicate name. Observe carefully. But here I have a question. What about my question here? Is it possible to provide alias names explicitly for our applications? Is it possible to provide alias names for our applications? Yes. In Spring applications, we are able to provide alias names to the Spring applications, alias names to the bean components, alias names to the bean components explicitly by using alias tags. By using what tag there? Alias tag. By using which tag there? No, alias tag. All of you okay? No? Right, sir. Then how it is possible? How it is possible? Now observe carefully. An example I want to say. Now try to observe this clearly. In the example. All right, sir. I want to remove all these things. Just a C1 only I want to provide. Here I want to use ID. No problem. ID or name, both are same. Both are okay. Now that we can use. Next, after this bean, here I want to use alias tag is available. alias tag is existed. Inside this alias tag, to which bean we want to create alias no, to which name we want to create alias no, for C1, where name attribute we have to provide the existed bean identity. What the duplicate name here we want to prepare there for that C2. For C1, alias name is what no? C2. Okay. I want to take one more alias name, alias. Now this time what I want to do there, for C2, I want to prepare other alias name. That will be like what there? C3. For C1, alias name is what? C2. For C2, alias name is what there? C3. In this way, we can prepare any number of alias names. Okay. After preparing like this alias names, now in our tester.java, on the base of C1, we can get customer object. On the base of C2, we can get customer object. On the basis of C3, we can get a customer object. In all three cases here, we are able to get the customer object. All customer object references are displayed or not? So what is the meaning of it now? We can define alias names. We can define alias names for each and every bean explicitly by using alias tag. Inside this alias tags, two attributes are available. One is name attribute and another one is what their alias attribute. Here, name attribute will take that existed bean to which you want to define alias name. Bean identity we have to provide. But whereas alias names, alias attribute will take the duplicate name. So by using original identity and by using duplicate identity, we are able to get that bean objects directly. This is the meaning of alias name. Now can I have a question? In alias name, can I use a C3, C4 space C5? In a name attribute, we might be provided, but along with alias tags, can I use this? Is it possible? Let me check it. Now, here what I have to do there inside our application node, tester.java. Now, here I want to provide C4, C4, C5. Yes, C5. Is it possible? Now we are getting an exception. Up to two values here we displayed there. Third value, no such bean definition, no bean named C3. Why C3 is not available? Here multiple values we provide along with alias tag. So it is not accepting that. Only one value is available for alias. Alias duplicate names we are going to prepare only one. Duplicate names we are going to prepare for only one. Am I right or not? Okay, fine. That's why it is not possible. So what is the conclusion here I'm telling there? Multiple identities are not possible in aliasing. Multiple identities are not possible in what they're aliasing. In alias names, multiple identities are not possible. Please recognize this. Okay, fine. All right, sir. Now these are the experiments here we have to understand about like what they're aliasing, how we are able to provide aliasing. Now let me remove this. But I have one more question. What about my question here? For multiple beans, is it possible to provide single alias name? Multiple beans. Single alias name is possible or not possible? Okay. Let me check one example, guys. Anyway, let me check one point here. What I want to do now. Here, only beans we have taken, only customer bean here we have taken. New bean component here I want to take. Class. What is that class here? Say, for example, student. Inside the student class, I want to prepare now private string student ID. Anyway, not required even. Properties also I don't require. Here I want to provide public void get student details method. Now get s out student details that I want to display. Okay. Now here for this I need to provide some configuration in a Spring configuration file. A separate bin here I want to take. Bin, inside this bin ID is equal to just what I want to provide there ES1. Okay. Then class is equal to what you have to provide there com dot Durgasoft dot abb08 dot right what we have to provide beans dot then student that bean information here we have taken. Properties are not required. Now tell me here what I am telling to you. S1 is a identity for what their student bin. Okay. Now here what I am telling to you here my requirement is what there for both customer and student. Can I prepare only single identity, single alias name? Right. What I'm thinking there alias name is equal to C1 space S1. Now here S1 is nothing but one bean, C1 is nothing but another bean. For both of them, can I provide alias name like what they say for example, can I provide alias name A1? Let me check it. Is it possible? Ambiguity situation is coming or no ambiguity situation? Okay, for example, think about it. If A1 is a duplicate name for both the beans, no, for example, when I access get bin of A1, which bin has to come? If I access get bin of A1, then what bin will come here? Is that C1 or S1? There's a confusion or not? That's why it may not allow. I think so. It may has to give some exception. No, 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 no. In a test application, I don't require like what there in a Spring configuration was C1 and S1. That's it. No S2 and no S3. C1. Now I don't want to maintain these two. No. And C4 is also be not required. Now get what I'm trying to provide there. Now instead of writing this total part here, okay, I want to write like what there directly A1 for C1. That means I want to use that A1. Which object is generating there? That we have to understand now. Which object is generating that we have to understand. First of all, whether it is giving any exception or not, that we have to check. No such bean definition exception. No bean named C1 space S1 available. No bean named C1 space S1 is available. That means in a Spring configuration file, we provided in a Spring configuration file here we provided whenever we provided C1 space S1 here, immediate IOC container will search for the bean which is configured in configuration file whose name is C1 space S1, but no bean is existed here now. So because of that reason, we can conclude that single alias name is not possible for more than one bean component. Single alias name is not possible for more than one bean component. This is another point here we have to observe clearly. Next one after that. So this is the total awareness on ID attribute and name attribute. ID attribute is able to allow single identity, whereas name attribute is able to allow multiple identities, not more than that. Next one, after that, scopes related point here we have to understand. Next concept is ID attribute and name attribute both are completed here. Now we have to observe carefully scope related content. Inside this bean configuration, what is available, sir? Inside the bean configuration, what we are getting there? Bean tag, ID attribute, name attribute. Then what next one here? I forgot. One more point I forgot here. I have a question now. In a single bean, can I use both ID attribute and name attribute now? Can I use both name attribute and ID attribute at a time? Possible or not possible? Possible. Possible. Don't think it is not possible, then it is possible here. Let me delete this alias and everything here. I shown that proofs now. ID attribute is like what there C1 and name is equal to C2. Name is equal to what? No, C2. Overall, one is ID attribute value, other one is what there? C2. Okay, now let me go for our tester.java program here. Now here, I don't want to use this one. Now this, I want to use a C2. Okay, customer 2, and here also I want to display customer 2, customer 1. Okay, fine. Let me execute this. If I execute this, it will not get any problem. There are 2 times we are able to get customer object reference values. So both ID attribute and name attribute we can provide. But what is the use? What is the use? No use is available, but one identity is sufficient. One identity is sufficient. But in this case, single bean object has 2 identities. One is a C1 and other one is what? No, C2. Yes, sir. Name attribute and ID attribute. Whenever we provided ID attribute, then that value is acting as actual identity. When we provide name attribute value, then it is acting as alias name for the ID attribute. Whenever we provide ID attribute and name attribute, no, ID attribute value is an actual ID attribute and the name attribute value is acting as what? No, alias name for the ID attribute value. Okay, we can provide both. Right, sir. Next one is after completion of this particular point. Another thing is like what there? Scopes. Scopes in scopes for the beans in a spring. All right, sir. Now before that, now tell me, in general, in a core Java, we are able to have number of scopes. Different scopes are available in core Java. What are the various scopes inside the core Java for the data? No, public, protected, default, and private. Public, protected, default, and private. These are like what their scopes. Public is available throughout the system, throughout the application. Default is available up to the present package. Protected is available up to the present package and child classes in other packages. Private is available up to the present class. These are data scopes. Similarly, in the case of Spring applications for beans also, we can apply scopes. Similarly, in Spring applications for the beans also, we can apply scopes. The scopes to the beans in the sense, how long the bean objects are available, how bean objects are going to be created. Answer my point here. How that bean objects are going to be created, how long that bean objects are going to be available, that we are going to understand in the case of these bean scopes. What are the various scopes are available inside these beans? What are the various scopes are available? Observe carefully. To provide scopes to the bean components, Spring has provided the following scopes. What are the various scopes are existed here? First one is singleton scope, and the second one is prototype scope. Max, in this level we are going to understand only these two. Remaining things are not required now. They will be required in web module. But let me list out all the scopes now. Next one is request scope. and then after that session scope, then after that global session scope, global session scope. Then after that, the sixth one is after this global session scope, no. Next one is application scope. Then seventh one will be WebSocket scope. Overall, these many scopes are existed in a Spring framework. For the scope attribute, we are able to provide either of the things. What are the various scopes are available there? Singleton scope, prototype scope, request scope, session scope, global session scope, application scope, and WebSocket scope. Now here we have to understand one by one by one. Now. Each and every scope here we have to understand. But as of now, we are going to see only these two only. Remaining things will be covered in a web module. Why? Because your scope is not available. Your situation is not available to explore the remaining scopes. Only first two scopes only here we are going to understand. But what is the purpose of the first two scopes now? Right, sir. In this case, IOC container will create a separate bean object, for each and every bean configuration in a Spring configuration file. It able to create one separate bean object for one definition in a Spring configuration file. That means if we call 100 times get bean method on the base of that identities, every time we are able to get only one bean object. We are not going to get a different bean object. Every time we are able to get only one bean object. That's the meaning of like what no singleton scope. Moreover, the singleton scope is a default scope in Spring applications. If you have not specified any scope in this bean configuration, by default singleton scope will come. This is a default scope. This is a default scope for all the beans. This is a default scope for all the beans. So what is the specialty of this one? If we access multiple times get bean method, if we access multiple times get bean method, then single bean object reference value will be returned. If we access multiple times get bean method, then single bean object reference value will be returned every time. Will be returned every time. Okay. Only one bean object will be returned every time call of get bean method. Same class, another configuration if we provide in a Spring configuration file, another bean object is also be created. So how many bean configurations can be provided inside the Spring configuration file? That many number of objects will be created. For example, only one bean configuration I provided. So one object will be created of the same class that will be returned whenever we are calling get bean method. Okay. For the same bean class, if we provide two times configuration, no, two bean objects will be created. Two times if you provide configuration and two bean objects will be created. Right, sir. Now this is the scenario about the singleton. Let me check the singleton component here now. Singleton scope. I want to check it. Now try to observe this clearly. Single object will be created, not for JVM. Single object will be created for a definition in the Spring configuration file. This is misunderstanding in general what people are having there. People are saying only one object will be created for a particular class throughout our application. And some people are saying single object per JVM. No, this is wrong. Okay, then I will prove that. I'll prove that. Now observe carefully. C1 object we created. Scope is equal to, what's the value here we have to provide there? Singleton. Scope is equal to what there? Singleton. Even we are not required to provide that singleton. By default, it will take like what there? Singleton only. Okay. This is one thing. C1. Alright, sir. Now, in our application, C1, now here customer 2. Next one, customer 3 and C1. Customer 3, C1. Now, observe carefully. How many times I call this get bean method? 3 times I called get bean method for the same C1. Am I right or not? 3 times I called this get bean method with the identity C1. No? How many objects we are expecting there? Three objects or one object? One object. As per the singleton, only one object. Oh, sorry. Okay. Here inside this test application, 3 times we are calling get bean method. But in the configuration file, inside the Spring configuration file, how many bean definitions here we provided? No, only one bean definition here we provided. So here per bean definition, one object will be created. Even though we can call 100 times get bean method, but only one object reference value will be returned here. Now let us check this clear. I want to execute this test application. 3 times we are calling get bean method. Then all 3 times what we are able to get. Now let us observe this clearly. See, observe carefully. Same reference value or different reference values now. These reference values are same or not? Same. That means one bean object is created or two bean objects are created. One bean object is created. That's okay. Good. Now observe carefully. I want to copy the total thing. Now I'm providing this. Now this time it would be like what there. Okay, leave this one. It is not required for us. Now here ID value is what there, C2. Now observe carefully here what we provided. No, how many same bean class I applied? I declared 2 times. Same bean class I defined 2 times, but identities are same or different? Different. If we provide same, no duplication of the bean will come. But here we provided different IDs now. Okay. Now observe this. What it is going to be happen here? Now in test application, C1. Now 2 times C1. Now this time it is C2, and this time it is like what there, C2. Now it would be C3, C4. Observe careful. 2 times we called get bin of C1. 2 times we called get bin of C2. Observe carefully how many bean objects are created here. Inside the Spring framework, how many bean configurations here we provided for the same class? No, 2 times. In both the cases, singleton as a scope here we provided. That's okay. Observe carefully. How many objects are created here? One object or two objects now? One object. But one object 2 times we call get bin. Second object is also be created. 2 times we call get bin. That means now tell me a separate bean object is created for JVM or for get bean method call or for bean configuration Spring configuration file. Separate bean object is created for each and every bean configuration in a Spring configuration file. That's the meaning of singleton. It is not per JVM, it is not per like application. It is for one separate bean configuration inside the Spring configuration file. For every bean configuration Spring configuration file, there a separate bean object will be created. This is a scenario about like what there singleton scope for the bean components. Yes, sir, got my point or not? But for if we go for this prototype now, Prototype scope is available for each and every call of get bean method, irrespective of the number of beans inside the Spring framework. That just leave this one. How many times we call get bean method? Then every time we are able to get like what they know a separate bean object. Every time we are able to get like what there separate bean object. Every time call of get bean. Just calling get bean is sufficient. Automatically a new object will be created. In the case of what their prototype. Let's see this one. Small point here. Understand this. Now here inside this, just I don't want to take the second bean, sir. I don't require this. If I require this, then I will use this. But in place of the singleton, I want to use that like what there prototype. Prototype I have used. Okay, now inside my application, how many times we are calling there? C1, C1, and here also be C1. Overall, 4 times we are calling this C1 bin. Prototype is a scope I provided, but 4 times we are calling. As per the singleton, only same object will be written. But now prototype. How many times we are calling get bin method? 4 times we are calling get bin method. Then what we are able to get there? All 4 objects we are able to get or not? That we have to check. Now tell me, what is the status here now? 4 different objects here we are getting or not? Not like single object, not same object. 4 different objects here we are getting. So this is the meaning of like what now? Prototype. So for every call of get bean method, a separate bean object will be created. That bean object reference value will be returned for us. But in the case of singleton, what happened there? No, for all the calls, if you have only single bean configuration, a Spring configuration file, a separate bean object will be created. That's it. Now this is what exactly the story about singleton and prototype. These two scopes are existed. Remaining request scope. What is the purpose of this request scope now? In a web module, for every request, a separate bean object will be created. Session scope. In a web module, for every session, a separate bean object will be created. Understand my point here? Global session. Global session. For every portlet application session, a separate bean object will be created. Next one is application scope. For every servlet context object, for every application, for every servlet context object, one bean object will be created. Okay. Then after that, after completion of this, WebSocket scope is available for every WebSocket life cycle. Anyway, they are not required for us, no, just information point of view I'm telling there. For every WebSocket life cycle, a separate session object will be created. Not required. All these things we are going to be utilized in like a web module, not here. But here we have to understand only 2 types of scopes. No, what are the 2 types of scopes here? First one is what there singleton, and second one is what there prototype. Where number of duplicate objects are creating singleton or prototype. Where we are getting number of duplicates now. In prototype we are getting number of duplicate objects. So less number of duplicate objects are created in where? In a singleton. Max we are going to use singleton in our applications. We are not going to use a prototype max. Less utilization is available for prototype, but max utilization is available for what there? Singleton. Understand my point clearly? So this is what exactly the scopes information about it. But is there any chance to prepare our own scope there for the beans? No. 5 or 6 number of scopes are defined in a Spring framework. That's okay. But along with that, is there any chance to define our own scopes? No. Yes, definitely. We can prepare our own scopes also for the bean components. Right. How the customization is possible? How the customization is possible? That we have to understand now. Right. Anyway, it's a good story. Then Spring framework is providing some environment to customize the scopes of the Spring framework. So we can define our own scope also, not only this singleton, not only this prototype, not only all remaining scopes. No, we can provide our own scope also for the bean components. So how to customize the scopes and how to define our own scope for the bean components, that we are going to understand in the next class. I'll show some total path here. Okay, but before that, what I'm telling to you, before come for the tomorrow's class, no, better to prepare custom scopes concepts in our material. Just see the topic and listen some one time read that one time the topic, then come to the class. Then our work will be very simple. Okay, before that, if you want to understand the topic there, in core Java, one small topic we have to understand. That will be like what there, thread local, class information we have to know. After that only we are going to understand how we are able to customize the scopes. In core Java, one topic is required as a prerequisite. Try to complete the topic in core Java and see that custom scopes inside the Spring Framework topic in our framework, in our material. Try to prepare that, then come for the classes now. There we are able to understand effectively. Okay, right, sir. Then tomorrow I will not go for any class there. Leave it. I thought I want to conduct an exam on tomorrow, but not on tomorrow. I'll plan for it at some other time here. Why? Because the topics are totally in the middle now. Even not at prepared question paper also there. Then let me take some time here. Maybe at some other time I will conduct the exam there. But tomorrow no class. Day after tomorrow we can come. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Meet on day after tomorrow. See, and Abhishek, I'm telling to you clearly one point. No, see that Spring Framework I have given number of features. There is no guarantee to use all these features in our. There is no guarantee to use all these features in our application development or not. But what's the point here? What they are given the total information here we are discussing there. Understand it clearly. So it's not like this. Maybe then scenarios may not be possible immediately, but when the requirement is coming there, then only we are able to use it. But immediately on the basis of this alias name scenario, in the sense, maybe I didn't seen it anywhere else. Understand it now. So maybe I may not try for any particular scenario where alias names are utilized for the applications, but concept is available. That concept we are discussing now. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. We've been seeing. Let me check it. Plan for conducting Python training. Okay. Right. Thank you. Thanks a lot.